Kindly start, sir.
Good. Very good evening to all of you to this third talk in series of Himalayan Dialogue. The series aims to bring together scholars from Himalayan countries around the world to deliberate the cultural and historical connection, economic engagement, and geopolitical competition in the region and the beyond. Nepal voted on last Sunday for House of Representatives and Provincial Assemblies. More than 17.9 million eligible voters will elect a 275-member House of Representatives. Out of that 275 member of parliament, 165 will be elected through direct voting, while the remaining 110 will be elected through a proportional electoral system. And at the same time, voters will also choose a representative to 7 provincial assemblies. Out of 550 members of the provincial assemblies, 330 will be elected directly and 220 will be elected through the proportional method. Now, since Nepal is geopolitically and geosignificantly located between India and Nepal, so both countries keenly watching the outcome of this election. And so to talk on general election in Nepal and India-Nepal relation, we have Professor Sanjay Upadhya to talk on. Sanjay Upadhya ji is a Nepali author and analyst based in USA who worked for the BBC, the Times of London, Enterprise Service Khaleej Times, and United Nations. His latest book is Empowered and Imperiled, Nepal Peace Puzzle in Bits and Pieces, Kathmandu in 2022. To chair the session, we have Professor S.D. Muni, Emeritus at Jawaharlal Nehru School of International Studies and former ambassador and a special envoy to government of India. So without much delay, now I invite Professor S.D. Muni to chair the session. Sir, over to you.
Thank you very much. I think it's a very important and timely subject on which we are discussing here. Unfortunately, things are still not clear in Kathmandu to my mind. I think not more than 20% of the results are out still after 2 days of counting, and they may as well take 5 more days. So the clear picture as to who is going to form the government is still not emerging. But a couple of things are very clear so far as this election outcome is concerned. In terms of domestic politics, I think there is a huge resentment against the established leadership. And you find that some of the very important figures, Upendra Yadav, Krishna Prasad Setola, very narrow margin of victory for Prakash Man Singh. Even Shekhar Koirala is ahead, of course, but not a huge margin. So you find a resentment against the established leadership. The second factor which comes out very clearly that there is a total absence of ideology in this election. I think the kind of coalitions which have been formed are a very clear indication of coalitions for power. Everybody wants to grab power, come to power, and what happens to how they want to take the country forward, what kind of programs they have are of least significance. The third factor which I find in this election coming up is the rise of independents and the new forces, the young people. And there again, I think a large number of independents contested. Quite a sizable number of them are ahead, winning in various ways. Some of the new parties which came up have done very well. So that shows again, related to the first point, the resentment of people in general and the inclination towards the new faces, towards young enthusiastic workers, and see what happens. Probably it would be a hung parliament. Of course, the coalition, the ruling coalition will be ahead. There is no doubt, but I don't know if they will get the absolute majority. So let us see what happens. And depending on the character of the government, a great deal of policy expectations can be made. So far as India is concerned, I don't know. I have an uncanny feeling that India is putting its horses in both the camps. and therefore they are probably expecting whosoever comes, they will then try and adjust in one way or the other. But the Sher Bahadur Devba headed coalition would perhaps be more easily acceptable to India, perhaps, because Oli has put in a record of raising up nationalist issues and directing them towards India. The kind of surge which was evident on anti-Indian nationalism for political use is credited to former Prime Minister Oli. Therefore, there are fingers crossed as to what happens when Mr. Oli comes. But my gut feeling is that even if he comes to power, he would adjust if he has to see his own interest in terms of his perpetuation in power, and he might adjust with India. China is, of course, keen to bring the communist forces together. So far, they have failed. I don't rule out the possibility of their trying it over again, because they have huge stakes, not only in terms of BRI investments, but in terms of future. The Chinese want to have a very strong presence in South Asia, and Nepal matters a lot. And they have included Nepal not only in BRI, but also in the Himalayan networking corridor, where they want to link Nepal with Pakistan and Afghanistan, and probably link it up across the Himalayas in terms of transit and transportation. These are political proposals. Their economic validity is debatable, highly debatable, but there is no way that China would be disinterested in Nepal, no matter which form of government is there. And the Chinese have shown the resilience of, again, adjusting with any kind of a political formation, though their preferred formation is the communist regime. But they can adjust with anyone else. And I think with their checkbook diplomacy on the one hand and Wolf Warrior diplomacy on the other, they would continue to have their very assertive presence in Nepal. But I think let us listen to Professor Sanjay Upadhya, who is closer to the situation, though being physically far away from that. But I think his insights would be very helpful to us. And with these words, I hand it over to Professor Upadhya for his enlightening analysis of elections.
Thank you, Professor Muni. Thank you, Dr. Rajiv Ranjan. It's a privilege and honor to be speaking on this subject today, and thank you for inviting me to share my thoughts. As Professor Muni so succinctly put it, there is still some unsettled perception of what the election outcome is going to throw up as a government in Nepal, so that we can make any firm conclusions on the manifestations and the impact on Indo-Nepal relations. But we can just draw some broad contours of what might emerge in terms of Nepal's relations with India and the broader geopolitical situation Nepal will be navigating in the coming years. Now, one election, doesn't probably repair or destroy relationships. We've had elections in the past where India has always loomed large. This election, I think, has, if compared to the last one in 2017, the last one was held when the election that Mr. Oli came to power on was this emergence of the more consolidation of the China factor, where Mr. Oli used the nationalist plank to gain votes and establish himself in power. Now, this election, China is, of course, looming large as well, but China, is under some scrutiny as well. I mean, this is probably something new, especially with the BRI debt trap, with the, even the Chinese motives and intentions, everything between Chinese nationals involved in petty crimes all the way to, how much of a reliable partner they would be for the political formations in Nepal. So that's one difference that I can see, which will have an impact on Nepal's relationship with India as well, in terms of perceptions, in terms of Nepal's situation between the two giant neighbors. Having said that, I always like to, describe Nepal and India as locked in an embrace of, estrangement of sorts, because the split personality we can see in Nepal vis-a-vis India, it's, as I and other people have pointed out, we have perceptions where India is seen as, for lack of a better term, a threat to Nepal's existence. And again, at the same time, the first line of defense of Nepal's independence and sovereignty, any trouble that goes on, it's always India that has come in and is expected to come in and help the country, whether it be natural disasters, political situations, all the way from 1950 to 2005-06. So this contradiction will persist irrespective of the election outcome and who does this. And so I think where in the broader picture, we have this situation where Nepal, now it's very unfashionable, I think, these days to speak of, the concept of a buffer state, but, the interesting thing is, Nepal being buffered and then the buffered country having some sort of, struggling to have some sort of agency, trying to make the best of all situations coming through. And that will be a recurring theme of Nepal's foreign policy, I believe. And, the Chinese, they have a hard time accepting the practical dimensions, at least, rhetorically, they would say, you have stronger civilizational ties with India. We understand that, but the practical dimensions of those ties, you can read their publications and, get a very sense of how they also, seem to accuse Nepal of playing one off against the other. India, of course, has adjusted to China's growing arrival into South Asia, into Nepal, as Professor Muni pointed out. This is going to be an established reality that we have to cope with. And now we have America coming in very strongly in Nepalese domestic politics, especially after the MCC and the way that it was handled before its passage in the Nepali parliament. So here we have a unstable triangle, despite, India and the United States being on the same side in most cases. But I don't have to explain here, how difficult, a greater role, American role in Nepal would give anxieties to certain quarters in India, which are bound to come up, as the weeks and months unfold ahead. As we can see on bilateral relations, we have the border issue. Now, it was Mr. Oli's rhetoric and Mr. Oli's subsequent comments after that, especially regarding the birthplace of Lord Rama being not in India but in Nepal, those kind of things that kind of marred the atmosphere. We have to understand that this is a long-standing issue that all parties in parliament kind of, accepted the new map and the determination of the Nepali state to get its the territories of Kalapani, Limpiadhura, Lipulek, all these back. Now, however remote or difficult or complicated or probably improbable that might seem, that will remain a factor, I think, depending on the degree with which the government of the day will have its orientation and show its commitment, determination, or even political wiles. We have trade and commerce, of course, lots of complementarities where both countries have benefited, or at least have the expectation of mutual benefit. But again, there, is a lot of politicization depending on the parties concerned, labor unrest, or maybe, even political rhetoric overtaking these prospects. We have the broadest ties you can imagine, between India and Nepal, especially the border, bordering Nepali state, the Tarai. I myself can vouch for that, as a student, when I was living in the southern township of Biratnagar, I would go every day to India to read my newspapers. The dark edition would arrive faster than the New Delhi edition coming from Kathmandu. So it was a visit to India every day, would crossing the border, and that those relationships will survive, will continue. Based on the political outcome of the elections, we can clearly see which formation, as Professor Muni suggested, emerges in power. From Nepal's perspective, also, the Nepali Congress, Mr. Deopa's party, if it retains power as the head of a coalition, looks likely, it would probably have restore India-Nepal relations on an even keel, very deliberative, very probably moderate kind of public pronouncements going in, and try to build that important relationship. But again, there we have a lot of the Nepali Congress, is not the Nepali Congress of the 1950s or 1960s, 70s, where it had very personal interactions, personal relationships with Indian leadership, the Indian establishment, and much of that still persists. But there is another strand of American-oriented younger leaders who will probably have that aspiration of expanding Nepal's ties, options within the Indo-Nepal relationship that will have to be taken into account. The UML, I mean, of course, it's still has given a tough competition to the Nepali Congress. If it comes to power, which is theoretically possible, we know that Mr. Oli and his well, his party now, that following the split earlier in the year, last year, that he will take credit for this this nationalist stance. Of all the parties that cannot go back on the map issue, that will always hang over the bilateral relationship. Mr. Oli is probably the least resistant to any watering down of his rhetoric. He will compromise. It's not his party is not the party of following 2017. He must have learned his lessons also, and the practical dimensions of taking on this issue in the public sphere rather than using diplomacy and quiet persuasion to resolve it. The Maoists, Mr. Prachanda is doing well in the counting, but the Maoists have fared below expectation, their expectation, of course. A lot of resentment, a lot of disillusionment with the traditional parties, having hit the Maoists the most, it looks like. They would have to now, how they will cater to the base. They, throughout the insurgency, even after, Mr. Prachanda is pragmatic. I mean, in a sense, you have to see, his whole transformation from guerrilla leader to the key fixture of Nepalese politics. But even within that transformation, it all depends on how the Maoist leadership will cater to the base. That will have a lot of implications for Nepal-India relations, apart from other things. That is one thing we need to watch. Then we have the royalists. I mean, they haven't done remarkably well. I mean, from one seat, maybe they will go in the last parliament, they will probably go up to 4 or 5, and depending on the proportional vote, a little bit of that. And that has always been an issue that will impine upon India-Nepal relations, in the sense that they are the ones that probably have the least ability or willingness to accept the political change of 2006-8. And although they have this Hindu restoration campaign, it you can sense alienation from the brand of Hinduism, Hindutva in India. So how that plays out, especially with their allied small groups. I mean, not politically maybe insignificant, but they really raise the hackles and social media, maybe a little bit on the public square. That's one thing we will have to see. And then the newer parties, I mean, independents and the Rashtriya Swatantra Party, basically a constellation of independent candidates who have done well, who have most vocally represented the disillusionment or disenchantment with the traditional political forces. Now, they are new. They haven't been very able to articulate their foreign policy vision. Specific issues such as federalism, they have spoken. We don't know much more beyond how they will cluster in the new parliament as an organized force that will have a bearing on Nepal-India relations, and especially we will have this new force in the Madhes, C.K. Raut's Janmat party. I mean, he personally, Mr. Raut, basically, has been portrayed as secessionist who has been brought into the mainstream. He has done extremely well. His party, candidates have done have been leading in constituencies. How that plays out and against the erosion, if not exact marginalization of the traditional Madhesi forces, that will be one factor. And then we have the Unmukti party, basically in Western Nepal, just 1 or 2 seats, maybe even that will have a presence as they articulate their vision in parliament, where in a situation where it is very, very hard to distinguish, Nepal's domestic politics with, in India as a factor, maybe China again coming in a close second. Basically, it's going to be a coalition, broadly unstable politics, which will probably continue, which will be draw India, for political purposes in Nepal. Well, that's a guaranteed win for, all political parties. It has been, sad to say that it should be such, but that's one thing that we will have to live with. But going ahead, both sides just need to cool passions, I think. Well, both sides in the sense, and Nepal's politics and India being the larger country, larger party to the relationship, I think has managed this hands-off policy little better. Very so, we're letting events play out themselves and just not reacting, no knee-jerk reaction. Of course, in the initial days, there was some media and public pronouncements from officials that did mar the atmospherics a little bit. But now we have gotten from India's side a little deliberation, moderation. And Nepal would have to, come up with a way to deal with it that way. Now, small things, they have a tendency to really win over this public perceptions of the relationships. And one thing that does rile, Nepal-India relationships at the public level in Nepal, at least, is India's inability to, accept the EPG report, the Eminent Personality Persons Group report that made suggestions, recommendations on the entire gamut of the Nepal-India relationship. That is something, and in the absence of India's inability to accept it, there have been leaks in the Nepali press that have just kind of fueled speculation as to why India has this delay in accepting a set of recommendations that are, seemingly from our side, from the Nepali side, productive and, constructive and conducive to overall bilateral relationship. So going ahead, how are we going to do these things? I think in the short term, it's going to be a very, we have to wait for the dust to settle, of course, after, how this comes, the final election results, the proportional representation seats that are coming in. Once that all settles and then the new parliament convenes, people would take a period of introspection, and then try to draw their own lessons internally. That way, I think we can expect even small gestures. In the bilateral relationship, I do like I haven't seen this movie itself, this movie called Unchai, but it has drawn, the very trailer, the very image of India's top movie stars attired in Nepali, dress, doing this picture of Nepali stages, Nepali scenery, Nepali settings, that kind of has had a positive impact, these small things. I mean, book publishing, like Nepali authors being published in India, that's something very, very growing, which I think has done a lot. The growing interest of cricket in Nepal, that has been a source of positivity. These things, I think, will have to continue, and they are the things that will do a lot to change perceptions. I mean, of course, at a broadest level, Nepalis have seen India's growth, not only as a regional, but an international power, especially in the GC, even the latest example being the G20 summit, how it steered the final communique. So we have all those things, and there is so much that Nepal could stand to benefit from India, to stand from, especially being, within the two Asian giants. But unfortunately, Nepal's own struggle to survive within this growing straitjacket comes out in manifestations that are very, very unfortunate at times, especially when it comes into the public square in Nepal, and then certain reactions from India, the inability to understand, both from India and China. I would say China, even the media, coverage that we see here is like, we're not playing both sides, we're just trying to find our way. And sometimes it just turns out to be very crude and very unpalatable in the way these things manifest themselves. So I think there is much we have learned from our past elections, the past of Indian interactions, and Nepal handles its split personality vis-a-vis India. That will, be in large part dictated by the way the maturity the political leadership displays, the media, our own media, of course, civil society. These things we can wish for, but the challenges, the opportunities have always been there. I mean, it's not that we don't see the opportunities, but narrow short-termism, parochial interests, these have been overtaking the atmospherics in a way that is not conducive to either country. And I hope that the Nepali political leadership that emerges will have learned its lesson and, just retrospected hard enough to realize that here we have the greatest opportunity, one of the unique relationships in the international system that we need to preserve and we need to promote to the best of our ability and explore the possibilities, take advantage. Small steps here and there, bigger steps at the political level. They complement each other. We have, just because we have big issues that need to be resolved doesn't mean that, we cannot try to work them in a more dispassionate, deliberative manner and see where things take us and promote the overall bilateral relationship together. And this, I think the onus will lie on the new parliament, the new government, the new leadership, the new formation that the election has thrown open. So with that, I would like to conclude my remarks and thank you for this opportunity to present my views.
Thank you. Rajiv, to you now. What do you want us to do?
Sir, if there is some question, then we can, I can read it.
Go ahead. You must be seeing it on the chat box or question answer.
I think there is one question for you, I guess. So you may like to.
I'll be happy to answer that, but go ahead. You tell us what to do now.
So there are a very small question. I don't think it's a very preliminary kind of thing. Okay, the one question that Fabian E.T. is asking is there any ideological differences between the different factions between the communist parties in Nepal? I think. So what are the kind of the.
Let Professor Upadhya respond to this.
Yes, sir, Professor
I
Upadhya
will add if need be.
Yeah, Professor Upadhya.
Okay. Oh no, the communist movement. I mean, we have this situation not only now. I mean, it's been a while since the formation and the split of the communist movement in Nepal, where they're more personality based. Ideologically, of course. I mean, there's hardly any hardcore communist remnants of traditional communism left in these parties. I mean, the unified Marxist-Leninists, having joined the parliamentary system, have become basically social democratic party, more or less. The Maoists have changed, despite their unwillingness to depart with the name, the Maoist name. I remember former Prime Minister, the late Manmohan Adhikari, said in one interview that, the communism is just a label for us. He was very candid about that in one of the interviews, I think, with a Western journalist. This is just a label. It's just good at election time. But now it has become more personality based. Mr. Madhav Nepal's party, Jalnath Kanal Madhav Nepal's party being different than Mr. Prachanda's party, and then the unified Marxist-Leninist UML, Mr. Oli's party. So ideologically, in terms of Nepal's basic orientation, it would probably more akin to, BP Koirala's democratic socialism. I mean, not the Nepali Congress of today, but maybe the early BP Koirala 1959 era, the Nepali Congress. So ideologically, I would not see that much of, a difference. Of course, now when you speak of ideology, it's very hard to take India out of the picture. Now, in terms of how they see or, choose to see, India at times, depending on the time and circumstances, that may differ. It may sound, like they are more ideologically rabid or, moderate. But in terms of domestic policy, we don't see that ideological disparity or, contrast that normally would validate the necessity of so many communist parties in one country, in one parliament. Dr. Muni, of course, you might have something to add.
Muni, sir, can you chip in?
Well, look, if you go history-wise, then any communist party anywhere in Asia have been influenced by the international communist movement. The Nepal Communist parties got a split when there was a Sino-Soviet split. And I think one section of the Communist Party, I used to call them and many other friends, the Royal Communists. because they joined hands with the king and started supporting panchayat system in different ways. That was UML, incidentally. Now, the rise of China has brought in the Maoism in Nepal. And I think the Maoists came up with a huge promise of new Nepal. And somewhere they have lost their track because of power, I have a feeling, or what you call the mainstreaming. As C.K. Raut is now also mainstream, the Maoists were also mainstream. Good for Nepal in the sense that it took the volume of the violence away and the disruption away, because King would not have won the Maoist militarily at all. Now it is good that they have done, but ideologically, I don't know if what tenets of communism they are all following. Now, Mr. Oli has been in power. He did not bring in any communism in terms of social reconstruction of Nepal. And even when the Maoists have been in power, except for Babu Ram's, some of the cleaning of the towns and a new industrial policy which he wanted to run, but his industrial policy was as good as a bourgeoisie industrial policy. So in terms of ideological parameters, it's very difficult to say. And both the Maoist and the UML, that is Oli and Prachanda and Madhav Nepal and Jalnath Khanal, they have all been together. They have actually split up on the question of power. That's what I said, that in this election, I find the total absence of ideology. I mean, no matter what is written in the election manifestos, frankly speaking, the equations and the campaign has been either personality based or in terms of what equation can get me closer to the power. That's what the whole question has been. So I don't see, I mean, I would, for instance, I would not rule out the possibility of the Maoists joining back with the UML or UML joining a coalition with Devba again. And Devba and Oli have worked together. See, this is a strange political flux in which extremely difficult to pinpoint or fix identities in terms of ideological parameters.
Thank you, sir. Professor Upadhya, you have mentioned that you have given the example of Nepali Congress and how the leaders from the India and Nepal have kind of lost the personal touch. So Abni Sablok is asking a question that how the India and Nepal can use or utilize this cultural connection to strengthen the Nepal and India relationship.
In some respects, I think this this connection, this relationship is going on. I mean, at all levels. I mean, it's just that the public manifestation of this discontent, this resentment, or lack of this discord in the bilateral relationship is magnified, and it has overtaken these things. I mean, what I say is, people fall sick. Where do they go? They go to India, depending on their situation, circumstances. Movies, language, Indian TV channels. I mean, these links are there. These haven't been haven't been eroded at all. If you ask me, in my circle, where I see, so the thing is, we have to just acknowledge, at least from the Nepali side, that these civilizational ties are there, and they are that what bind us together. The personal relationship between the traditional leadership, say independent India and anti-Rana, Nepal, from that time on, we probably still have those. I mean, you see Indian leaders, Nepali leaders meeting at levels where they have this very close bond, close touch that, it's sometimes surprising to us, to see that, how these irritants have been able to, gain the upper hand all these times. But I think it's a matter of not allowing these irritants and not giving them undue place, the more than what they deserve. I mean, that our leadership has to understand that because, it's bilateral relationships, no matter how close, they are they're mutually beneficial. So there are two sides to it, and we have to just understand the other side is saying, what the other side's complaints or, admonitions or even, criticisms are, and take them in the constructive spirit, in the right spirit. If Nepal has not been doing a lot of things that is very important to India, maybe we have to listen to, what could be done to foster this relationship, because and understand that it's too valuable to squander, in the interest of third or fourth or fifth parties, or distant or alien, quote unquote, forces. So I think this flow that we have is going on very well. We just need to see the discordant notes in their proper perspective and not exaggerate them.
Muni sir, you want to?
I can give a very provocative answer to this question. In fact, the political leadership in Nepal never had a viable relationship with Indian political class. And let me explain it to you. The Indian political class had relationship with the monarchy. And
Yes.
it continued until King Mahendra. In fact, King Mahendra's action of dismissing the political parties was not very good. And this is where he got alienated by Nehru, and therefore Nehru's successors also. But the Congress party did not have a great personal relationship with the Nepali Congress leadership. The Nepali Congress leadership had a closer relationship with the socialist faction of the Indian National Congress to begin with, like Jayaprakash Narayan.
Yes.
Later on, even George Fernandez, for instance. And even when BP Koirala was given shelter in India, he was more close to the socialist in India, or socialist of the Congress variety in India, not the Congress bourgeoisie party as it is ideologically. The communist parties had little relationship with CPM and others, but it was not really great in terms of the political outcome. Now, what has happened is that there are diverse channels of personal equations in Nepal, and one of the most powerful personal equation is the matrimonial ties. And still the royalist, the feudal matrimonial ties are still the strongest. You would recall that even in terms of mainstreaming of the Maoist, Dr. Karan Singh was sent by the Congress there, largely because of the matrimonial equations. And even now, there is a very strong lobby in almost all the parties. There are very influential people who are married into Nepal, in India, and in Nepal who are married into. That's why they call it roti beti, and at a social level as also at the political level. In fact, I have been, as this question implies, whenever I meet Nepali leaders, I tell them to have more viable institutional relationship in Indian political class. They mostly have, as Professor Upadhya has said, mostly have personal relationship. But that doesn't go beyond a certain limit, and it doesn't really work very well. Later on, I think to some extent, the royalist established relationship with BJP, which is now very important in the sense that I do see there is a strong constituency within the ruling party in India, which would want the monarchy to come back. And even during Atal Bihari Vajpayee, monarchy had good relationship with BJP. I got some information where some of the BJP candidates were funded. And Yogi Adityanath of UP Chief Minister, who is now, who was the chief of the Gorakhnath Peeth in Gorakhpur, has very close relationship with monarchy and with the royalists in Nepal. And also they want to have a Hindu state. So there is a new constituency which has come up, which has quite close connections with BJP and at the moment, but is still not strong enough to completely reverse the state policies. So Indian state is still, hesitating from openly supporting a Hindu state in India or a Hindu state in Nepal, or bringing back monarchy, because they know there would be a huge backlash in Nepal, because these democratic leaders have now developed their own stakes in not getting the monarchy back. Because they are now the real wielders of power, and why would they share power with monarchy and remain at the hands of the monarchy? There is absolutely no reason. So there are issues which, anyway, we can go on and on this. But I find that the personal relationship, in fact, it is amazing that the communist parties of Nepal have institutional relationship with the Chinese Communist Party. They have signed documents with the Chinese Communist Party. There are no such documents between the Nepali political parties and the Indian political parties. And most of the relations are unorganized, unstructured, personal, emotional, family ties, whatever.
Thank you, sir. Dilip Goyal ji is asking, is there any continuity or change under the Modi government vis-a-vis Nepal relation with India? So Professor Sanjay can answer that.
Well, in terms of continuity, we can see that the Modi government very much, now I'm not privy to the actual goings on, there, but they have at least officially followed, despite all the pressures that Dr. Muni pointed out, the 12-point agreement, that course that was going on for the previous Congress government, that wants to see Nepal, a stable, strong, democratic system going on, and officially, I'm saying. So we see that they even the perception in Nepal is that despite their all differences of Indian parties, their robust debate on specific issues or specific challenges, when it comes to foreign policy, national security, they are all one. And Nepal has not seen or detected anything from official India to see that it has departed from that. Whereas privately, even less, non-officially, we always hear these statements or even pronouncements or speculation or innuendo or, indications of, the restoration of the monarchy, the Hindu state, or that going on in the Nepali press. But officially, when BJP or government leaders visit, when their interactions with, it's always been with the Nepali state, the power that the official, government parties, the parties in opposition. So in a show of officialdom, I think there is this perceived continuity from what we can see in Nepal. But in terms of the broader dynamics of it all. Maybe Dr. Muni has insights that would be valuable here.
Professor Muni, sir?
Should I? I see a change. There has been a change. Prime Minister Modi was very enthusiastic on his first visit to Nepal. And he became totally put off from Nepal by the time his second visit took place, because he could not go to Janakpur and all that. And then followed, as you remember, an interference in the constitutional process. And then it was followed by the so-called economic blockade, which infuriated almost everybody in Nepal. That this kind of harsh action had not been taken earlier, though there was a blockade earlier also during Rajiv's time, but not of this type. For 5 months, they had a very serious problem. And I think that is what turned Oli to exploit the kind of resentment created by the Indian action in Nepal for his own political advantage. And he did it very well. So he won that election, and later on, even this border issue has come up. You know, border issue was not raised earlier. I don't want to go into that fresh controversy, but he exploited it. And even in this election, he's the one who has touched upon some of the India-related issues. The other coalition partners have not done. Maoists have not done much about it. But Oli has said, I will take these areas back and I will assert ourselves. In fact, there is a fear that the citizenship bill, which was passed, would also go into the election campaign. Fortunately, did not. Otherwise, that would have also banged on India. So in terms of, there is, as I said, there is a constituency in the ruling party which favors Hindu Nepal and which favors monarchy. But the state in India, as I said, has not been able to follow that line so far formally. Informally, I know that whenever Nepali leaders come, even the BJP leaders sound them on Hinduism and on the BJP's officials have repeatedly gone to Nepal and created constituencies there which are more sympathetic to BJP. So there is in terms of Modi's approach, substantially, I agree with Professor Upadhya, substantially the policy has not changed, hot and cold. I find India-Nepal relationship is like Saas Bahu drama in Indian TV, that you fight and you come back again together. And there is no separation, there is no permanent separation possible. But there is no permanent, what you call harmony also possible in the house. And this is a very strange relationship, but that's what my view would be on.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. So we have 2 minutes left. So Professor Upadhya, your concluding remarks you like to have?
No, I mean, we have these engagements such as this forum, this platform, interactions between people of Nepal, India, and your entire series, Himalayan Dialogues, initiatives like this, and people like, we have people like, let's say, Dr. Muni also, who has spent his entire life, studying Nepal-India relations. And, I am from a generation that grew up reading Dr. Muni and his vision of Nepal-India relations, the promise that it holds, the contradictions that hold it back. So I think these discussions do have an impact on the overall understanding of, they generate criticism, some gratuitous, some constructive, and we should go on, doing these exercises at our own level, apart from the government initiatives and other programs that we go, even non-official track 2 things at the very basic level of people. Here people will watch, listen to, maybe see, how we two sides come together on these things. So I think this is a great initiative and something that should be continued, which will give more sustenance to our relationship and show that, not everything is, about resentments and disenchantments and disillusionments, but here we have constituencies that are invested in improving relations, making the most out of both countries for our both sake, common sake.
Professor Muni, sir, your concluding.
Well, I am very interesting interacting with Professor Upadhya. I think very interesting questions. We can't go beyond. But election results is still a big question mark. And I wish the political situation was clearer for us to draw some firm conclusions. But I hope still I see that the coalition will win and there would be greater stability in Nepal's foreign policy as such. Though I find, coming back to the point of China, there are questions, there is a scrutiny of the relationship with China. But China has very powerful stakes, in my understanding, to remain very active and involved in Nepal. And I don't think they would easily give it up, particularly in view of President Xi's pronouncements and work on Tibet, on Xinjiang. These are the areas which are very vital for Nepal, and they will continue to have concentration on Nepal. So I think no matter what government you have in Kathmandu, we will see this India-China competition very live, very active in Nepal. And both the foreign policy offices in Beijing and New Delhi will be kept busy as to how to manage each other. But in an interesting phase which we are entering in, and let us hope, wish and pray that everything goes well.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Professor Upadhya, for giving us a very comprehensive and thought-provoking ideas and comment. And also Professor Muni for chairing the session and coming up with a very engaging answer to the question that has been posed by the audience. We look forward to continue this dialogue in future, and we hope to see Professor Upadhya and Professor Muni to meet in person. And I should be kind of organizing this talk in Delhi or in Kathmandu. So let's hopeful for future engagement. And for that, we should be ending this dialogue here. Sandeep?
Thank you.